Hello and welcome to the Herdline Podcast, hosted by Trace Johnson and the Herds Headset. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode where the Headset and Trace talk all things Marshall athletics. Be sure to follow us on X and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. Now, sit back, relax, and let's talk the herd.
Welcome back to the Herdline Podcast. Trace and the Herds Headset with you. We're ready for a very cool episode today. Going to be kind of a two-part episode. First part of the episode being an interview, a conversation that we're really looking forward to. It's been in the works for a while. We are going to be talking to former Marshall linebacker, former Marshall freshman All-American, and Conference USA champion DJ Hunter, who was a very integral part of the Herds defenses from 2012 to 2015. Really looking forward to talking to DJ. Myself and him, we've been on social media with each other for years. We like talking the herd. He's just a Marshall fan through and through now, and it's great to see. And I can't wait to hear some of the stuff that we get into today with DJ. And second half of the episode, we'll just talk about we're going to finish up the series on Marshall football coaches and looking back on their tenures. It's going to be all the way back as far back as we can go. We're going to try to talk about as much of that stuff as we can, as well as wrapping up baseball and softball. We haven't gotten into that yet either. So before we get too deep into it, DJ, how's things been going for you, man?
Man, it's been going good. No complaints, man. Need to get back up there to Huntington sometime soon, and I'll feel a lot better.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Can't beat the Joan, can't beat Marshall on game day, that's for sure. Great place to be. But we'll just start out by asking you, what we usually do is we go back and forth. Headset will ask a question, then I'll ask a question. We'll just kind of alternate back and forth like that. That seems to be the best method that we've come up with. So we're really, really interested to hear some of your perspectives and some of your thoughts on a lot of this stuff. Because like I said, this was the era that we were in school at this era. This was the era where we were really, very fond and very into the program a lot more. I know me personally, I was big into it at this point. This was a great era for Marshall football. We can't wait to talk about it. So I'll go ahead and turn it to the headset here, and he'll ask his first question.
Yeah, again, DJ, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it, and we want to make sure that we make the most of our time together. We don't want to waste your time especially, and so it just means a lot to us that you're here. But, I wanted to kind of ask the first question with this. I always think it's interesting that when fans look back at a player's career that we tend to start with the story at college because, we as fans, we remember the big plays, the wins, the statistics. But the reality of it is this, those stories started way before you ever got to Marshall and put on a jersey here. So take us back to your upbringing just a little bit. What was life like for you at home, and who were some people that kind of shaped you early on? And as you look back now, whether it was your parents or family members, coaches, teachers, whomever it may be, what were some principles, habits, and standards that were just poured into you as a young man that prepared you to be able to come at Marshall and make such an impact?
Man, for me, to be completely honest, I don't think I could ever narrow it down just to one single person. It's always been a lot of people, who played a role in, just me coming up and just playing sports. But my dad would be the biggest figure if I had to say one. I had a cousin. His name was Daryl Hunter. He played at Miami University when Ben Roethlisberger was there. So I would always go see them. At one point, they were number 6 in the country at the time. So, he set the standard first, but my dad definitely made sure I stayed on point and just stayed committed to whatever I wanted to do. My path to Marshall was pretty much a little different than everybody else's. Much love and respect to Doc Holliday, Coach Hamrick, and that staff, Juwan Sider, Kelly Raines. I think she had left when I got there and went to the University of Florida. But it was a lot of people who played a part in it for me. I love my university, so any conversation that you ever have with me, it'd be a little bit different. I'm forever indebted to my university. I always represent it. I bleed green and everything about it. So, man, it's just so many people that I could probably reach out to and just say that played a part of me being where I am now and my career off the field and on the field. Tara Heltons, the Doc Hollidays, Todd Hartleys, just so many people who just played a pivotal role in just you developing as a player. Adam Fuller made me a smarter football player, to where, I relied on talent more than anything. And then I met Adam Fuller, and he just made me a smart football player. So, man, it's so many people, man, from Pee Wee to to growing up, man. I can't narrow it down to one. That's not me. I can't do it.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I'm thankful for every single person that poured into you, because that loyalty, that desire to still, like you say, represent Marshall, it means a lot to us as fans, because if you don't forget where you came from as a player, now as a man, we will never forget you either. And I hope that you feel that love from all of us here at Marshall. Absolutely.
100%.
No doubt about it. It's a special place. We talk about it. It's not just hyperbole. You know, it is what it is. if you know, you know. You know, we know. And we're thankful for it. So my first question is going to talk a little bit about your freshman season. So I'll let in with this. You had a huge freshman year. You know, you ended up getting freshman All-American from Sporting News, I think it was, and you had a really big year personally. Great numbers, great start to your career. But the 2012 defense, but that defense also had some struggles that year, and that's been very well documented. I want to hear that even despite your best efforts, you had great numbers and you did a great job that year. The defense still was having some struggles. So kind of talk about that defensive effort that year a little bit. Talk about kind of what went into that. Like, what do you think really was the difference that was holding y'all back that year?
Man, to be completely honest, with that 2012 team, like you said, I had a good season as an individual, but some of our key players were all out and injured. Like, we got plagued that year. Darryl Roberts was out, who went on to be a 7th-round draft pick and played 8 years in the NFL. Evan McKelvey was out, Defensive Player of the Year, when he had ended up coming back off an ACL injury. James Rouse was banged up. We didn't have any corners. We didn't have any linebacker depth. And we had 2 safeties that transferred in from Boston College. So the chemistry wasn't really where it needed to be. And then you could see, like, once everybody got healthy and got back on the field, you can see, like, what we were able to do that next year and so on and so forth, you know, because you're looking at our resume that we were able to compile after that was consistent 10 wins seasons. So, like, we were, man, to be completely honest, we were banged up, man. We were banged up. The offense was putting up 40 points and we couldn't stop anybody because everybody was out. Darryl Roberts was out. Neville Hewitt wasn't there yet. Evan McKelvey was banged up. James Rouse banged up. Corners banged up. We didn't have anybody. Pac-Man was playing. He was banged up, literally in a full body cast. Derek Thomas was playing in the net role with number 2 at corner. So that's really what it was. And then we ended up getting a Hail Mary with Chuck Heater as defensive coordinator, who set the standard high. So that's another thing as well.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, the transformation you all went through from 2012 to 2013, just 2013 alone, one of the best turnarounds we've ever seen at defense for the Herd. And that, I mean, and you spouting off a lot of those guys, those are big time players, big time contributors, like pros, all pro, NFL caliber talent that you all were missing that year. And it was a big difference for sure. So I'm glad that you got it figured out the next year, and Chuck Heater did amazing stuff for the Herd. That was great to see, no doubt about it.
Yep. And that kind of leads me into this next question, DJ. So one of my favorite memories as a Marshall fan was the 2013 Military Bowl. Fantastic season, and really that was the accumulation of just a lot of effort, a lot of hard work. Of course, you're playing Maryland in Annapolis, Maryland at the Naval Academy. So I'm just curious because, fans remember the final score and the statistics and the highlights. I remember I was at the game. It was my first ever bowl game that I ever attended as a fan, and it was just a special time. But, you're playing at the Naval Academy. You're taking on a power conference team in Maryland. You've got Marshall legends even around the program during that time. Byron Leftwich was at the game and was one of the honorary captains. What do you remember from that particular week of just the experiences, what you guys were able to do, and what was the point where you kind of realized, man, we're about to put together the exclamation point to one of the most memorable seasons in Marshall history?
Sorry about that. I'm at work.
No worries. You're good.
You're good, man. You're good.
I got you, man. But to be completely honest, the Military Bowl was probably our favorite bowl that we've ever been to. It's always been a good bowl. That's probably a bowl game that everybody still talks about to this day. Because me now, I live in Atlanta. Darryl Roberts lives here. Neville Hewitt lives here. Taj Letman lives here. We're all back in the same city for the first time. But that Military Bowl run, man, for me individually, it wasn't my best year. to be completely honest. My Military Bowl year wasn't my best year, but just like everything for that Military Bowl and just what they were able to accomplish, like going up against a Power 5. It seems like anytime we played a Power 5, we always beat them. So Louisville, we beat Purdue when they had came to the Joan. We beat Maryland when we played Maryland. It's just like, hey, like, it's just a name. It's just a school. Like, they got to play us at the end of the day. No matter where I go, like, I always got on my Marshall gear. I went to Ohio State game, and all you hear is, like, we ours when I'm walking at an Ohio State game. Actually, versus Maryland, me and my fiance ended up going. But, like, we're college football royalty, man. Like, it is what it is. You're going to have to show us. Line up with us, and then we'll go from there.
Absolutely. I love that mindset right there. We need to have that collectively as a program, as a fan base. That's exactly the mindset we have to have, because, that's what Marshall has built itself on over the years, defying the odds, just shocking people, upsetting people. That's the hard work, determination. That's what Marshall football. That's Marshall football to a T right there. No doubt about it. So speaking a little bit about 2013, I had to ask you about 2013 through 2015, because in the modern era of Marshall football, this was our peak. This is our peak era. We go 33-8 overall from 2013 to 2015, win a conference championship, win 3 bowl games. I mean, we were just rolling like we hadn't been rolling in probably 15, 20 years by that point. So what kind of went into some of the strides that you all took as a team to get to that point? And what are some of the other aspects that helped get you all over the hump that maybe not a lot of fans even know about or would even think about? So what's some of those things for you?
I mean, to be completely honest, like we know, like we said, Chuck Heater played a pivotal role in just like the mindset that the team took going forward once we got him. But to be completely honest, another piece was just getting everybody healthy and back on the field. You got to think about it. Like I said earlier, those guys that we had, Darryl Roberts went to the NFL. James Rouse went to the NFL. Neville Hewitt went to the NFL, 10-year NFL vet. AJ Leggett was nasty. We had a crazy secondary, like the linebacker core. Evan McKelvey, Defensive Player of the Year. Neville Hewitt, Defensive Player of the Year. Jermaine Holmes, a consistent all-conference player, like a freshman All-American, and myself, and an all-conference player. Like, it was just so many pieces that we had, man. Our depth was crazy. And then that offense, like, what more can you say about that offense that we had over there with Rakeem Cato, Tommy Schuler, Gator Hoskins? That line, that offensive unit that we had on the O-line, it was nasty. The mindset that Coach Mirabal had those guys with each and every day, it was like our mindset was different. It don't matter who we went to play. We knew we were coming out on top. 100%. Didn't matter who we was playing. Line it up, see in the zone. Lock the gates, catch you in there.
Yeah, I mean, just literally you just talking about it, just the way, and you're putting all those players out there and all that. It's just like, oh man, just it was the good days. It was just the good old days. And I'm not saying that we're not in a good place now, because we are. Tony Gibson's going to do an amazing job for Marshall. I have no doubt about it. But man, it was just a different. The vibes, the atmosphere was just different during those years. And I was very fortunate to be a part of it in the student section. That's for sure.
Right. And the biggest thing too is because, just the university had gone through, like you said, Trace, a little bit ago, almost a decade of just really losing football. So you guys coming in, doing what you did, man, it sparked life into that university that has just been missing for so long. So, I mean, that's just that span of time, man, it was so special. And one thing that made that span of time so special was a certain rivalry game that kind of got more and more as the years went on. Of course, you smiling, you know exactly what I'm talking about, Western Kentucky. So, in the past, Marshall has had some really good in-conference rivals. We've battled against Miami, Ohio, like you mentioned. That was a really, really strong rivalry back in the day. Toledo, Ohio, we met in the MAC Conference Championship for multiple years in a row. East Carolina, UCF at one point in time. All those games are great. But, now we're entering into the Sun Belt era, and we're kind of trying to figure out exactly who is that number one rival. We have history with Appalachian State, and so that's great. But then also James Madison has potential. But for me personally, my favorite rivalry, because, again, I just lived through it, and it was just, my era of football was watching Marshall versus Western Kentucky. It felt personal. You're shaking your head already. I'm excited about this. They broke our hearts a couple of times. We broke their hearts a couple of times. And there's a couple scuffles from time to time too that maybe you want to talk about. I don't know, but now that we've seen Marshall schedule Western Kentucky for some out of conference games here in the future, I'm curious from a player's perspective, what made that rivalry feel so different during that time? And then more broadly, how important is it that you think that Marshall is getting back to some of those, former rivalries that we had all those years ago?
Yeah, I think we started that Western Kentucky rivalry. I hate those guys to this day. Not gonna lie, it isn't a day in our group chat. It got me, Swag, Neville, Evan, Freak. Like, we're all in the same group chat, and we still watch the game to this day.
Oh man,
Still go over the plays to this day. Like, that game broke our heart. I'm not really gonna lie to you. But they had a good team, man. Brandon Doughty was good. They had Tyler Higbee. They had Lamp at left tackle. They had a nice running back that was probably one of the strongest guys I ever tackled in my life. They had some good guys, man. They had some NFL caliber people, and they just came out on top that week. But I think we should always keep Ohio U. I think we should keep WVU. I think we should keep Western Kentucky consistently on our schedule because my wife is actually an OU alum, and I hate them too. I probably hate them. It's real, and it's super real. You never man, you guys all went to OU. I hate all you.
Yeah.
House, those teams. I think we should always keep on the schedule because the blood there is it's for real.
Oh yeah, it's for real. I mean, especially Ohio. You're going back. I mean, that's probably the team Marshall's play more than anybody. I mean, and I hate when we would play at Peden Stadium. Absolutely. It's just a horrible place to play football.
Trap.
Trap. Exactly. Every single time. I remember going up there in 2015 and it was oh my gosh, what is going on here? It's just annoying. It's we were better than Ohio those years and we beat them most of the time, but still. Great games for sure. Now, I wanted to ask a quick follow-up because you were talking about Western, and I had this question written down. We have our own separate questions written down, and I had this one, and now this is almost like a follow-up to what was just asked. So, in your opinion, you talked about it. You all talk about this game still to this day. You all try to figure out what went wrong. In your opinion, what did go wrong in that Western game? What exactly happened in that game? Because there was just a huge difference from what we had been used to. That defense was dominant the whole year except this game. So, what, in your opinion, went wrong there?
Listen, Trace, I'm not going to lie to you. That week was a weird week from the beginning. Uh-oh. I never seen Coach Heater as relaxed as he was. Oh. I never seen Coach Holiday as relaxed as he was, Coach Legg. And I remember when we all went in the meeting room, it was me and Neville. We had walked in the door. And then Coach Fuller leaned back and said, I don't know what you guys see on film, but you need to get it fixed. And it was something that I'll never forget. And then at the beginning of the game, everything that built up to that week was abnormal. We had Neville Hewitt, who's probably one of the most chill guys in the world, start the fight that started at the beginning of the game. I said, I'm looking today is off. I don't know what it was. And it was just to be completely honest, Trace, I couldn't even really tell you. I just looked up and it was 21-0, 21-7. I was we were looking at each other on the sideline, what is happening right now? Yeah. And the offense, Cato, I just remember Cato, get me out of Queen. Legg, get me out of Queen. If you don't get me out of Queen, I'm not going back out there. And then, because you got to think, we can't even pick Rakeem Cato off 4 times in practice.
Right.
You pick him off in the game 3-4 times?
Mm-hmm.
No way. So I'm telling you, man, that week was just weird, man. I can't really pinpoint it to this day. I'm still not over it. No one else is over it. We talk about it at least once a month ever since we left.
Wow. That's crazy. And it just, like you said, it just didn't make any sense because, and it's funny you say that because usually I'm not saying I can predict how a game's going to go, but a lot of times I'll have a certain feeling about a game and I'll be like, yeah, I don't have any weird feelings about this game at all. And I was the same way. Before that game, I was like, I don't feel like this is going to be anything. And it just totally fooled me. And it was a weird, I guess the stars just didn't align. I don't know what it was. It's weird.
Coach Fuller knew.
Wow.
He knew. 100%. I was just like, dang, Coach Fuller was right when it was all said and done. I was like, he was right.
He was right. Yeah.
Yeah, heartbreaking moment for sure. But you did get to play for one of the most respected coaches in all of Marshall football history, Doc Holliday. We did our episode kind of just summing up his tenure here. And I always have had the opinion of, we don't talk nearly enough about Doc Holliday. He deserves a lot of respect. Fans saw Coach Holliday on Saturdays, but, you guys as players saw a version of him that nobody else really got to see. So for somebody that never sat in meetings and practices like myself, like Trace, like anybody listening, what was he really like in day-to-day operations? What were some of the standards and, the things that he absolutely refused to compromise on? And what kind of personality did he bring to the locker room every day?
Listen, so I know Coach Holliday from WVU. First off, I love everything about Coach Holliday. Man, he saved so many people's lives. Like, he gave so many people opportunities to make their life better. Like, I think that's what catapulted him more than his resume. He was a good man. Like, I have nothing but good stuff to say about him, so I'm a biased guy. That's my guy, so I'm super, super biased. But, like, he lived and died by those core values. You better do the right thing. Like, he'll give you a chance, like, if he can give you a chance. But other than that, like, all right, okay, man, we can't really do nothing with this. Give it to the leadership committee, get him out of here. But, like, he was a wild boy. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, some of those meetings, listen, that podium didn't stand a chance. It was to a point where they had to drill the podium to the ground, like, just to keep him from tipping it over. But, man, Coach Holliday's a legend, man. He's, his resume speaks for itself. You can say what you want to say. I know it's biased and however you want to look at it, but, like, Coach Holliday is the one. He's that guy.
No, he truly is. He is the modern day, I would say, savior of this program. And, man, I'm beyond thankful for him. I know fans have different opinions and whatnot, and the exit of him was controversial and different things, but I've always been a Doc Holliday fan. I think that he is definitely a good man, a great coach, and was a fantastic leader of our football program during those years.
Yeah, I never really seen a situation where, you didn't renew the Coach of the Year's contract. I mean, it's weird to me. I mean, I think Coach Holliday should have left on his own, like, whenever he wanted to bow out. He was just in the conference championship, and then they let him go. But, I'm biased, so I'll take it.
Hey, I mean, that's valid. That's a valid concern. It's a valid thought. I mean, and, hindsight's a wonderful thing, because in hindsight, we would have been better off if we just kept him, because we know what happened after that. So, not that it was bad or on-field results, but he wasn't – Charles Huff was not the same as Doc Holliday. I mean, we're just going to say that.
And Kenway had got a better 2014 reunion than that. I feel like it was like last moment. Like,
it was.
There you go.
Right. That was. I mean, that you're talking about a 13-win team. Like, there's been what, like, one other team that's ever won 13 games in Marshall history. I mean, and I was so hyped about that. I was going back on a nostalgia trip. I'm like, oh my gosh, 10 years since this team. Like, I remember it all just so vividly, and I was like, I was very excited for that. And it was a little bit half-hearted, it seemed like. Yeah.
Yeah, we deserved a little bit more than that, and Coach Holliday definitely did. So
definitely, maybe that's something Gerald Harrison can kind of fix at some point in the future. I hope that happens. Yeah. I'd love to see the moment where Doc Holliday gets his flowers in the zone, because he deserves that.
Absolutely deserves it. And we were talking a little bit earlier about, well, I just mentioned it, that now we're in a different era. We're in the Tony Gibson era. I know you're a fan. You still keep up with the Herd. You know what's going on. So talk a little bit about what you think about this current era of Marshall football under Tony Gibson, and where you think the team could go this year. Because last year, they were a few plays away from being a lot better than they ended up being. And this year they return a lot of talent from that team. So kind of talk a little bit about what you think the future looks like for the Herd under Coach Gibby there.
I mean, to be completely honest, I think the future is whatever we want it to be. At the end of the day, when you play for the Herd, we set the standard and the expectation. So it's just about them going out there, the men getting ready for the season and doing what they need to do, like putting their hard hat on and really taking it serious every single day. That's one thing I can say that we did when I was there. We got better every single day, every chance we got, till they had to lock us out of that facility. It was like, dude, you're going to get us in trouble at this point. Y'all cannot be in here. And then guess what? We're just going to go to the rec field. So I'm excited to see what Tony Gibson does, man. It was his first year back, man. He lost a lot of talent. A lot of people left, went to Southern Piss. I mean, so I don't like them either. A lot of people left and went to Southern Miss. And, he had to scrape up what he could. I think this year, they got a few guys in. I think they'll be okay, man. I'm excited to see what Tony Gibson does for the program. And I'm excited to see where the future is going to go for us. Hopefully it's a 10-win season.
Absolutely. And I think we even talked about it on here that we see a lot of comparisons between Tony Gibson and Doc Holliday as far as their path to getting to Marshall, their mindsets. So I think you got a lot of similarities there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the biggest problems last year, really, honestly, for the most part, was not offensive issues. Really reminiscent to 2012. Now that you really think about it, there were stretches where things just did not look compatible at all. There's pass rush issues. There was coverage issues. There seemed to be a lot of missing pieces on the defensive side in particular. Now we bring in Brad Lambert, and honestly, Brad Lambert for me as a fan is somebody that I really there's lots of similarities to even Chuck Heater because I hold a very high place in him as far as a defensive coordinator in all of Marshall history. He had one of the best defenses his second tenure here. So, he's also bringing in, for what we saw from the spring game at the very least, a step away from the 3-3-5. And there was at least a couple formations that I saw personally where there was a four-man front. Right. So, you actually even you played against Coach Lambert your final season at Marshall, if I'm not mistaken, as he was at the head coach at Charlotte University at the time. So, from a player's perspective, what kind of stands out for you on the defensive philosophy that you think is necessary for Marshall right now, just judging off what happened last year? What do you think some things that need to change overall on the defensive side of the ball?
Like I said, you got to think about it, man. They lost a lot of pieces to the portal. Like, we got depleted once Coach Huff left and then went to Southern Miss. So, really, it's just about his Coach Lambert and then Coach Gibson getting their players in there and getting them in place. To be completely honest, I really couldn't tell you that, to be completely honest, because I don't know the ins and outs of this defense and what they're going to do. So I'll probably have to just check in on them, which I will. Like I said, I'll check on them throughout the season this year. But it's really going to start with their mindset and what they want to do. At the end of the day, we were telling people hey, you can't win if you can't score. Period.
Yeah.
True.
True.
About it, man. You're looking at those games from 2014 and 2015. Who really got 21 points on us? And in some of those games where they were scoring points, they were scoring that once the starters were out. Like, everybody was out by halftime, third quarter. So that's just the same mindset that they're going to have. And I know under Coach Lambert, he's going to make sure that they have it as well, because when he was there, they had some dogs on that team, like Tavante Beckett.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. Like, Defensive Player of the Year, the dude was probably – I always say this about Tavante Beckett. Tavante Beckett, Neville Hewitt, Evan McKelvey, the best linebackers I've ever seen play. Tavante Beckett, game changer. He was like a honey badger out there. He just making plays everywhere on the field. He was an outstanding player.
Oh man, absolutely. And you're talking those three guys from in a 6-year period, they were all defensive players of the year in the Conference USA. I mean, we're talking big time players. No question about it. I mean, it was special stuff. So I think I'm just going to ask one more question. And this one I didn't even have wrote down, but this one is just this game. I just got to ask you about this game. It holds such a special place in my heart. It's my favorite game I've ever been to as a Marshall fan. It's not Louisiana Tech. It's Purdue. So you knew I was going there. Yeah. So I got to ask you about what is just like, I don't even know how to ask it. What is like some of the things you remember the most about that game? Maybe not even like during the game, maybe before the game, maybe after game. Just what are some of the things that you remember the most about that game? Because it was just something special.
So if you were there, that's just one of those moments where you just had to be there and living it. Like you got that West Virginia game at Marshall in 2000 and what was it, 10?
Mm-hmm.
And then that Purdue game, when I tell you, you wanted to hear in a stadium erupt.
Mm-hmm.
Taekwon Lane got those interceptions and took them back to the house. The atmosphere in Huntington Like once we're cranking, it's second to none.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. She's packed. She's rocking. So that's really it, man. Like I was a team captain that game, man. It was the first game of the year. Coming in playing another Power 5 opponent. Like sent them packing as well. So like listen, I bleed green through and through, in and out, man. Like the Joan when she's rocking, there's nothing like it. It's nothing like it.
No, and that was on full display that game. Never heard it louder in my life than that second pick six. Never have. It was something else.
Yeah, that was an awesome game. And I got one more question for you because I know you got to get back and get to whatever you got going on today. But I just got this question. You know, over the years, you've mentioned a lot of fantastic players and different things. Who was the best trash talker out of everybody that you ever played against? Maybe even with and practice every single day. Who just got under your skin a little bit?
You know what's crazy? I was probably the most trash talking guy on the defense. I'll probably talk from start to finish, but on defense, they were just assassins, man. They didn't really do too much talking. They were about action.
Mm-hmm.
Offense, Rakeem Cato. 100%, like the ultimate competitor. Rakeem Cato. 100%, the ultimate competitor every single day, no matter what it is. Mat drills, agilities, practice every single day. Like even when we were in the CFL together, like we played against Montreal when I was in Hamilton, didn't change a bit. I said, my boy staying true to himself, man. Like that, 100% Rakeem Cato, 100%.
Nice.
That's awesome. Now, I'll tell you what, it sure worked for him. So whatever he was doing, he sure knew what he was doing. That's for sure. But on that note, I think that pretty much covers it all. I mean, I know we're really looking forward to this conversation because, like I said, I mean, we're younger. Like, we're upper 20s, low 30s. I'm 32. So, like, I'm more familiar with your era. Marshall football. Like that is like, it is like ingrained in my memory. I mean, that's just what it is. And like, that was a special time. That was a time we hadn't seen in so long. And I'm glad to be, that we were able to witness it. And I'm glad that, we're able to come on here and talk to somebody that was a part of it and in the trenches like you. So appreciate it. Appreciate you coming on here. And unless you got anything else to add, man, I think we're pretty much done.
All right, man. Appreciate your time. Shout out to all my guys from the 2014 to 2011 to 2015, Devin Johnsons, the King Catos, the Tommy Schulers, the Gator Hoskins, Daryl Roberts, Neville Hewitt, Evan McKelvey, Jermaine Holmes, all my guys who were in my wedding as well. So, man, listen, just appreciate you guys. Appreciate everything. Appreciate the city of Huntington and the state of West Virginia as well.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And we hope we'd love to catch you at a Herd game sometime this fall or whenever. We'd love to catch you down there for sure. And maybe eventually we'll have you back on again. I know we've had a great conversation, so I'm sure there's a lot more to talk about. And I'd like to hear your perspective on more things as we can move along. So we appreciate your time, man. And we thank you and have a good day and go Herd.
I appreciate you, man. Make sure you get some of my other guys on here too.
We'll be reaching out. We're not done yet at all.
See y'all later. Appreciate y'all.
See you later, man.
Peace.
Throwing on first down, hammered by DJ Hunter. This guy's just a freshman.
And we thank you very much again to DJ Hunter. Thanks goes out to him for a great episode, a great conversation. We're very thankful to have him on here and get to talk about that era of Marshall football. So great time there for sure. And now we're getting into the second half of the episode now as we got to wrap up softball and baseball because we had kind of left it at right before the postseason, right before the Sun Belt tournament started and all that. So we left it at that. We had not caught up on it quite to this point. So now we're going to go ahead and do that. It was not the greatest ending, especially for baseball. Softball, a little different story, but just looking at baseball. Well, it didn't quite go well in the last series of the season. They go at Texas State and get swept 3 games in that series, 5-0, 12-9, and 5-4. So not the greatest ending to the season. They do get the 10 seed in the Sun Belt tournament. They snuck in by the skin of their teeth. They had to play the 7 seed Louisiana in a single elimination game, and that did not go well whatsoever. 1 iota, 11-1 loss. So baseball goes out on a pretty sour note there. 23 and 31 overall record, 23 and 32 overall record, 13 and 18 in the Sun Belt. So it was not quite the season that we had hoped for. I mean, there were some mitigating circumstances. A couple of their top pitchers didn't really play, and there was some stuff like that. But overall, they just did not really live up to the hype at all. Softball, as we know now, they got all the way to the NCAA tournament, and they were able to get a bid into the tournament, which was awesome to see. First time since 2017. So Morgan Thurkle goes from the last time they make it, she was on the team, to now she's coaching. So very cool full circle moment there. They get a game against Arizona in Durham. They have a very tough competitive game against Arizona, but ultimately did lose 7-5. I mean, Arizona is a dynasty in softball. Like, if you look at their track record, it's nothing to sneeze at. They've done it all essentially. So that was a competitive game despite the loss. And then they had to play Howard in the elimination round after that, and they did beat Howard 4-2. Very nice win there. And then they have to turn around in like 45 minutes later to play the host team, Duke, who's one of the best teams out there. And unfortunately, they do get run ruled against Duke, 11-1. So it just didn't work out. I mean, I just don't see. I know that's just the way that they do it, but that just seems really crazy to me to have them turn around that fast and play somebody else. But that's just part of it. So go ahead and talk a little bit about softball and baseball, wherever you want to go with it, because we got to wrap it up. We've followed them all season, so they got to do it justice and finish them out. So go ahead.
Well, in regards to softball, man, I mean, I'm not disappointed by any means. Of course, I am a little bit just kind of, I guess you could say, confused on how the season ended. You know, the whole James Madison series at the end, not good. The whole conference, tournament, obviously not good. And, but, being able to win at least one game in the NCAA tournament, that's a big deal, no matter what, even if it was against a Howard team that probably wasn't necessarily like the same comparable level as what Duke or Arizona or whoever else was. So, I can't be super, super upset with the fact that we went to the tournament, we won one game. I mean, I'll take that, I think that what, Coach Zirkle is building for the softball program, we talked about this at length before, is incredibly, incredibly impressive. The entire program collectively has come such a long way. As Zirkle was playing, we saw that elevation of the program, and now it seems to be evolving even to greater lengths. And so, I know that I'm pretty sure that Burko will be coming back next season, barring anything crazy taking place. I know that he posted a couple things that has kind of hinted at the fact that he's not going anywhere. So that's good news. He's going to probably be in the consideration for one of the best softball players ever in the program history before it's ever said and done. So whenever you have that returning, that's always a good thing. I think the big thing that they need more than anything at this time is, I've talked about this before, they need those on-base hitters. They got a lot of power, got a lot of people swinging for the fences, but, to complement those Burko players, man, you imagine how many more RBIs he would have been able to have if it wasn't just single home run. You get a couple people on base here and there, and then all of a sudden, you're in a lot more games than what you would be. I think pitching's also a big deal. We had great pitching all season long, but there were just a few inconsistencies, especially towards the end. I think that, having more depth as far as pitching would be a very, very big deal for them. But overall, though, they're building something special. I can't be mad. I can't be upset by anything that's going on for the softball program. As far as baseball is concerned, we've just kind of gone and back and forth with them all season. The beginning of the year, there's a lot of expectation. There's a lot of hope that they would be able to be in a position that really we've never seen before at Marshall. It kind of seemed that it was going that direction. There was lots of excitement, a couple of years in, having a nice stadium, good facilities, getting players, got guys from power conferences coming into play. But for whatever reason, it just seemed that they couldn't get everything put together. And that's a shame. It really, really is. The pitching was inconsistent at best for the most part. Bryce Levens, of course, was your all-star. Every time he took him out, he knew that you're going to be in the game no matter what. He did not have hardly any quality or not quality starts that they were not very close to being in the game with that. But when you get into the bullpen, when you get into those other rotation guys, it was just difficult. That's just how it was. And sadly, a lot of the fans lost interest in the back end of the season because you had big opportunities. You had really, really good teams that you played on the schedule that, I mean, you had an opportunity to beat, but just couldn't get it done. So, at this time, I'm still not upset with Coach Fields by any means, because you have to remember what he inherited. This program had nothing. I mean, we were literally just a team that was in a base. I would honestly equivalent it to being a Rutgers in the Big Ten, because you remember Conference USA back in the day, they were a fantastic baseball, conference. Rice was always, top 15 team. ECU is always top 25 team, and they had some very, very good teams. And Marshall just was there playing at the YMCA. Then you transition over to the Sun Belt, and then the Sun Belt's even better than the Conference USA was. You have Southern Miss, you have Louisiana, you have Troy, you have really, really solid baseball programs, and it's difficult to be even competitive with those teams. So the jury definitely is not out. Okay, it is not out on Greg Fields at all. I think that he still is the guy for this program. I think he's done a terrific job, and I hope that next year we can get back to what we saw a lot of last year, and then I think that we can have a more healthy expectation, because again, it might not necessarily mean that all right, we hover around 500, that automatically means that we're going to be conference contenders. Well, maybe not. Maybe if we just hover around 500 for a couple of years, get some consistency, get our name out there, get some wins where maybe we shouldn't have won, kind of like last year, beating Southern Miss, different things. Maybe you get a win or two against a Coastal Carolina. That does a lot for your program. So I'm hoping that in the future those things can happen, that we see more consistency out of this team. And I just can't wait for the day that Marshall finally reaches a point where they are at the top of the conference, and just getting out of this middle pack. I just can't wait, because I'm telling you, man, when and if they ever get there, Huntington's going to support those guys. I mean, we're going to see 2,000 people in the stands, no problem, every single game, maybe even more. And we're going to be up in that top 5 in attendance in the Sun Belt. So I can't wait for those days, but in the meantime, looks like we're going to have to wait a few more seasons before we see that action.
Yeah, I mean, and it's I think a lot of people we had big expectations this year. I mean, a preseason number 4 pick in the Sun Belt is a pretty big deal. I mean, you're talking about, like you said, a very, very tough conference. A conference that's put 5 teams into the postseason. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about you will pick 4th in that conference preseason. I mean, that's very high expectations. And I mean, I think they were warranted. Last year was a good year and they returned a lot of players, but there were also some other circumstances that went in. You had your two of your top pitchers didn't play. I mean, you got to deal with that. You got to deal with the fact that we are still an establishing, growing program. We have not reached our apex yet. We have not gotten to that point yet. Yeah, we've made a lot of great strides with the new facility and the recruiting and just more solid footing than we've had in many, many years. But we're not there yet. We're not a finished product, and we've talked about that on here. So I think they'll be fine moving forward. I agree with you, Greg Fields. He's going to get it turned around. I have no doubt about it. Next year, I think you'll see a lot different things out of the Herd than you did this year. And as far as softball goes, I mean, that program's trending in a great direction. I mean, they're not even a finished product yet, and they're already an NCAA tournament team. So I think that really says that they could be really, really good moving forward. So it's exciting times for both programs, I think, moving forward. Yeah, it's a little disappointing how they ended, but I think there's better days ahead for sure. And we look forward to it next year and beyond. So moving on now, we got to wrap up with we've been doing a series that has been very, very good series for us about looking back on former Marshall head football coaches. We've had a lot of success with it. I mean, when you get Jim Donnan reaching out to you and come on the podcast, you've done a good job. Not to toot our own horn, but I mean that was amazing. Again, thanks. I got to just say thanks again to him for coming on, because that was sensational. And we have to wrap up the series, and we're going way, way back. Now we're both WWE pro wrestling guys. We're going back Usos day one-ish with this right now. Okay, we're going back. I mean, we're going literally as far back as we can go. I mean, we're not going to be able to spend a whole lot of time on each coach, because number one records back then and stats and all that were very, very conflicting and just not very sound like they are now. And number two, there's too many to talk about and go deep into it. But we are going to start with the very first, well, we'll start with the very first paid football coach in Marshall history. But I have to mention the first ever football game in Marshall history, which again, there's conflicting reports on this one. Some say it's 1895, some say it's 1898. They lost to Catlettsburg 11-5. Okay, Catlettsburg in the 1890s was a powerhouse, number one. But so I don't know for sure if it was which year it was, but lost that game. First win in Marshall history, allegedly, was in 1901 against Charleston. I don't know if this is Charleston is in West Virginia. I don't know if it's Charleston is in South Carolina.
It would have had to have been somewhere else because back in the day, I think it was Davis and Elkins, was it not? Like the University of Charleston used to be Davis and Elkins.
Okay, then it might have been something else then, yeah. But yeah, so Marshall, who knows? This is all just just to do as to be as thorough as we can be. Marshall won that game 6-0, so great shutout win there. So looking at the first paid head coach in Marshall football history, George Ford. We're talking I've seen some reports that said 1902. I've seen others that said 1903 through 1904. Don't really know which. But he was the first ever paid football coach in Marshall history. Gotta put that out there. Because we've had however many we've had since then, he's the first one. So, gotta talk about that. And then if you look at the second head coach in Marshall history, Alfred McCary was coaching them in 1905. He had a 6-2 record. So, that's pretty solid. Looking at that, we have a coach by the name of W.G. Vinyl. In 1908, we go 0-6. So, not great there. Looking at 1909 through 1916, Boyd Chambers was the third head coach in Marshall history. He actually had a pretty good resume under his belt, 32, 27, and 4. So at that point, that would have been excellent because they hadn't done anything by that point. So he coached them that year all the way through 1916. 1916 is also when they did that tower pass, where they had the players up on the lineman's shoulders to try to catch the pass. Man, that's genius. That was absolutely genius. I don't know why they outlawed that. They should have kept that. But yeah, absolutely legendary for sure. Looking at their fourth head coach in history, Carl Shipley, in 1917, he goes 1-7-1. So we got a win there. Archer Riley was the fifth head coach in Marshall history. I think, didn't we talk about him before we started recording?
We did.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And you said that he went, I didn't get this for sure. He went undefeated? Is that what it was?
From what I understand, there are two coaches in Marshall history that have undefeated records. Arch Riley in 1919 at 8-0, and the other, Rick Minter, at 1-0. Little Caesar Pizza Bowl champ. Shout out to him.
Well, look at that. I mean, that's pretty impressive. You didn't lose a game, so congratulations there to Archer Riley. Great work there. And then the year later, well, actually, no, the same year, 1919, that was the first time that they used the Thundering Herd nickname. So that's pretty cool as well. Yeah, I do have that written down. 8-0 in 1919. They only allowed 13 points the whole year. You talk about defense, buddy. That's defense right there. Only 13 points allowed.
And what's interesting about this Arch Riley coach is he's a baseball player. He's a third baseman. Oh. They played in the major leagues, I think, with the Pittsburgh Pirates all those years. Really? So just came back, coached one season for the Herd, and then also was baseball coach as well. I think he went 8-8 with baseball. But he was definitely a baseball guy. But hey, he never lost in football. So
yeah, that's a pretty nice little feather on his cap there for sure. So 1920, we move on to our sixth head coach at that point, Herbert Kramer. He goes 0-8. 1921 through 1922, we have Kemper Shelton as the seventh head coach. He goes 11-6-1. 1923, Harrison Briggs goes 1-7. 1924, Russell Meredith goes 4-4. And then 1925 through 1928, we actually had a decent amount of success. Charles Tallman was the head coach at that point, 22-9-7. And they were the West Virginia Intercollegiate Athletic Conference champions in 1925 and 1928. So that was the most success we had seen at that point. And then 1928 also coincides with the opening of Fairfield Stadium as well. That was the year it opened. So,
Hey,
Go ahead.
just something real quick about Paulman. I was just doing a little bit of research about him. You know, he's a football coach. He coached basketball too, and it's also known he was also a law enforcement officer. So he just was the jack of all trades. What a different time back in those days. You imagine being a coach at a college, university, and also that's kind of the part-time job. You got to make money and pay the bills, so you have to be a law enforcement officer by night. So,
Right.
Just crazy. Just crazy.
Man, what a time. What a time. I mean, I couldn't even imagine with all that stuff that they had going on. So, yeah, that was pretty cool that he was able to have that kind of success with them. And then, he was the coach whenever they opened Fairfield Stadium. That's a nice little trivia question there. And then from 1929 to 1930, we have a coach by the name of John Maul-Best. He goes 8-2. So kind of just decent, whatever. 1931, 1934, Tom Dandelet goes 18-16-2, and they were the West Virginia Intercollegiate Athletic Conference champions in 1931 before they joined the Buckeye Conference in 1933. So, and then after that is when we get into the first major prominent head coach in Marshall history. But before we get to that, I know you kind of added some stuff here and there. So just, if there's anything you want to add with these early coaches, anything you want to add, go ahead and talk about them a little bit.
Well, one thing that I do see here is that we're finding out that the beginning stages, the infancy of Marshall football, was not the greatest. I mean, you got a couple of guys that were at 500. Of course, Art Riley was batting 1,000 with the undefeated season. But for the most part, there's lots of losing seasons. There's lots of just slightly above average. Yeah. So, Marshall was definitely lighting the world on fire. There's a couple coaches that were able to get some things going. But, for the first couple of decades of Marshall football history, it was more or less just, middle of the road, not too great. And, that's just how, a lot of football programs in the day were kind of, I guess, viewed at, because football was definitely not as popular as it is right now. Number one. Number two, nobody put that much effort into it. So, I mean, these guys were like milkmen by day. They came together and just said, all right, boys, let's get together. We're going to run the football every single play and, smash them out to the core. So, yeah, like we said, it's definitely a different time. And, but like you said, this next guy we're going to talk about, Ken Anderson, he changed the game literally. Like, he changed everything. So let's get talking about this.
He changed it all, and not just in football and basketball too. I mean, you're talking about the man that by many accounts is the man that created, not made famous, created the zone defense and the fast break in basketball. Okay, that is pretty big. And not only was he doing that as a basketball coach, at the same time he was coaching football at the same time. I just cannot even fathom how that was even possible. I know it was a different time, a different game and everything, but like, that is nuts to me.
Yeah, and both were good.
I mean, he put Marshall football and basketball on the map. I mean, but for our purposes right now, we're just going to look at football. But he coaches the Herd from 1935 to 1949. Now, granted, 3 of those years they did not play because of World War II, which we talked about before we started recording. That's wild if that was even, however that went down. So that was 1943, 1945. But every other year, from 35 to 49, he was the coach. He goes 68, 46, and 5. He's still, I think, top 4 or 5 in all-time wins in Marshall history. I don't know exactly what it is. 1937, they won the Buckeye Conference Championship. They go 9-0-1. So an undefeated season there. He had some very standout players. How about Frank Gunnar Gadsden? How about the only name on the press box at Jones Theater Stadium? How about NFL Pro Football Hall of Famer? He had him. He had another guy by the name of Jackie Hunt, who still holds a record of the most single-season touchdowns in Marshall history in 1940. He had 27 touchdowns. I mean, he had some players, and he knew how to develop talent. He knew how to coach them up. And then if you look at 1941, this was probably their biggest non-conference win at this point for probably the first 50 years of Marshall football, or more, maybe 75 years of Marshall football. This was probably the biggest non-conference win that they ever had. In 1941, they beat Wake Forest 16-6 at Fairfield Stadium, and that was a huge deal. They had never beaten anybody even close to that at that point. And then a few years later, this is after the program, after they started playing again after the war, 1947, he gets into the Tangerine Bowl. And that was the first time that Marshall had ever played in a bowl game. And back then, that was unheard of. I mean, that might as well have been a national championship. I mean, that was a huge deal. They did lose 7-0 to Catawba, who was, I believe, actually a ranked top 20 team at that point. So, that he put them in a level that they had never been at before. No question about it. Also was the basketball coach at Marshall from 1935 to 1955. He goes 362 and 160 at Marshall, and they won an NAIA national title in 1946-47. So you talk about jack of all trades. I mean, what more could the man have done? I mean, literally revolutionizing Marshall athletics. So talk a little bit about Cam Henderson and all of what he was able to accomplish there for Marshall.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, and it's not just Marshall, really. I mean, he's known to be a West Virginia just coaching legend, because like we talked about a second ago, he was at Davis Nelson, which is now the University of Charleston, before he came to Marshall, and it was much of the same. He coached basketball and football, and he had success in both places. And so, he's definitely a man who understood how to think outside of the box, how to create and I guess you could say develop his talent. And as you mentioned a moment ago, in 1947, reaching the Tangerine Bowl, people really don't understand how big of a deal that was, because bowl games back in those days were so rare. There was not as many as we have, not even close to as many as we have. So the fact that Marshall was able to make it, be a part of that, that is such just a colossal deal. And he was the guy that was able to the first guy ever in our entire history to bring them to a point of prominence and bring them to a point of national respect. And so, definitely just a fantastic coach for us. And 1947 was a pretty big year too, because that same year in basketball, that's the year that he won an NAIA championship. So he was rolling everywhere. I mean, he probably was the king of Huntington back in those days. I could only imagine. But yeah, Cam Henderson definitely revolutionized Marshall athletics in general, just everywhere, everything that he was a part of, and really looking through these coaches, up to the plane crash, he is the most notable coach in all of Marshall history, any sporting history, and arguably he still is even today. Got the Cam Henderson Center named after him, one of the best basketball coaches we've ever had, maybe the best, and so it's hard to top Cam. He's just a Huntington legend. He loved this place, obviously would never have spent as much time as he did here. And so, he's definitely somebody that we look back on as just an all-time great, a legend here at Marshall.
Absolute legend. I mean, he's as far as Marshall coaches or Marshall sports figures, you could say he's on the Mount Rushmore, quite frankly. I mean, he's definitely up there in that category. I mean, and the fact that he was able to double down with football and basketball both, and he was that good at both, is just kind of mind-boggling. Like I said, I know this was 70 years ago, 80 years ago. I know that, whatever, but still, man. But that's the other thing. People don't really realize that Marshall was not a very prominent athletic department at that point whatsoever. They had very, very, very little resources to work with. And he was able to win with that. So that was impressive, no doubt about it. But unfortunately, after that, the football success really starts going downhill big time. So you're looking at 1950. They get a new head coach, and Pete Peterson. He coached from 1950 to 1952. He goes 9-19-3. So not a whole lot of success there. And then from 1953 to 1958, new head coach Herb Royer goes 21-31-2. And they also entered the Mid-American Conference in 1953. And there's a lot more to talk about with the MAC and the drama that went on later on, two years later. So he didn't have much success either. And then you got 1959 to 1967, Charlie Snyder, who goes 28-58-3. Although he did have a couple good years in there. In 1963 and 1964, he has back-to-back winning seasons. And the 1964 winning season will be the last one they would see in 20 years of the program. So, things just started going downhill after that. He went 7-3 in 1964. He went 5-4-1 in 63. But then in 65, he goes 5-5. But then the next 2 years after that, it just goes bad. 2-8 and 0-10. And at that point, that started one of the most infamous losing streaks in college football history. Marshall goes from week 10 of 1966 through week 7 of 1969. They go on a 27-game losing streak. I mean, I just could not even have imagined that at that point. So Charlie Snyder had some success, but not enough. He's out the door. Then 1968, you turn around and you hire Perry Moss. And, well, you know, I don't want to speak ill of the departed, but Perry Moss basically killed Marshall football. Like, that's basically what happened. He goes 0-9-1, and he racks up, under his tenure, 144 recruiting violations for Marshall football. Paying players on payroll, car expenses, etc. It just totally wiped out whatever that they were doing at that point. They were pretty much done. I'm surprised they didn't give them at that point. I'm surprised they didn't give them like the death penalty. But they end up getting kicked out of the Mid-American Conference after the 1968 season. So they literally have to start over essentially from scratch. So, you know, it was just a bad time. Bad time. And before we get into the next head coach, which I wanted to spend a little more time on, talk a little bit about these coaches that I've been talking about, and just the trend that Marshall football was on at that point was not in a good direction at all.
Well, I'd like to focus on Perry Moss for a moment. All of those recruiting violations, all of the money that was likely spent to go defeat him.
Right.
Like, what in the world, man? That's crazy. How is that even possible? Like, were they just giving away stuff? Like, just to anybody down the street? That's insane. But, you know, and really now you're seeing, this is whenever there was an entire shift, like these past few coaches that we mentioned. This is a shift in college football. People started to take the game seriously. Now we're finding around the entire country, hey, we're building stadiums dedicated to the football program. We're putting our coaches like on these contracts, and if they do not produce success, well, we're going to fire. We're going to, part ways with you and different things. College football, even in itself, is becoming a big time business. And so, like you said, whenever we start to get into those points where it is this big time business, other places are putting in money into the program for the first time ever in history. Yeah. Marshall just can't keep up. We're Marshall College at the time. We are one of the smallest schools in the state of West Virginia, let alone the country. So it's hard to be able to be on a level of anybody with, this great amount of success. And so, the Perry Moss situation, though, that's got to take the cake for me out of all of the coaches that we've ever had. Like, again, are we just giving these things out? Do we have, like, the middle school football team down the road come in and play every weekend? We're going 0-9, giving them cars and different stuff. That's unbelievable. Like, I just don't see. If you're gonna get in trouble, you might as well win a game. But I guess you tied one. So he's the only coach in all of Marshall history that has a .050 winning percentage. It's just crazy, but. Anyway, man, yeah. And like you said, though, this next coach, this is one of, we talked about this before we kind of got started with the entire episode today. It's one of the biggest what-ifs in Marshall football history. And let's talk more about this man, Rick Tolley.
No, I mean, I don't think there's a bigger what-if in Marshall history. I really don't. I mean, but with Perry Moss, I wanted to say this a little bit too, and I've watched a lot of things, a lot of interviews with older people, Rick Red and Dawson and all the different guys and stuff, and they were talking about that they really were bringing in some really, really high caliber players, but like they hadn't all gotten in there yet, and it hadn't like translated yet. So like, and I'm sure most of those players probably bolted after that. Why wouldn't they? And it was just an unfortunate set of circumstances there, because that's the program that Rick Tolley inherits in 1969. He inherits just a complete dumpster fire at that point. Like, there's no other way to describe it. I mean, whatever momentum they had, 10, 15 years before that was long gone. I mean, it was done. I mean, so you look at Rick Tolley, who comes in, and he's at this point the youngest head coach in the country. I think he was like 20, 28, 29 years old, whatever he was. He was a young guy. And, he was able to keep a lot of the coaches that he had. He kept Red and he kept some other guys and stuff. But, man, it was just always going to be an uphill battle for Rick Tolley. And in the 1969 season, I talked about that 27-game losing streak. Well, he ended up snapping that 27-game losing streak at home against Bowling Green in the middle of that 69 season. And they ended up winning 3 of their last 4 games in 1969 to go 3-7. So, they had started 0-6 or whatever they were, and they ended up actually finishing on a high note. And, there was momentum moving into the 70 season that they really could do some stuff. And the 1970 team, they end up 3-6, but man, if you look at some of the scores in some of those games that they had that year, they were not far at all. And they lost to Miami 19-12. They lost to Louisville 16-14. They lost to Bowling Green 26-24. And then, of course, they lost to ECU 17-14. So, I mean, you're talking about some really, really close losses. He was bringing in some very talented players that, kind of a level of talent that had never been seen at Marshall before. A lot of those Alabama kids that were coming in, Joe Hood, and a lot of those guys, and Shoebridge, and a lot of guys, very talented players. And then, of course, we know that was when the plane crash happened in November 14th there of 70, and that just totally just changed the entire program. I mean, it just didn't just change the program, changed the school, changed Huntington, changed the state, changed everything. So overall, he goes 6-13 as their head coach. But man, in my opinion, it's the biggest what if in Marshall history. What if the plane crash never happened? What if he was able to be the coach for the next 5 years? Where would he have taken them? Because I think he would have taken them to very, very good places. But unfortunately, we'll never know. And, obviously, what happened in the crash is far more important than wins or losses on a football field. So talk a little bit about the Rick Tolley era there and what was going on there and what he was building towards. We ultimately did not get to see come to fruition.
Yeah, the greatest sentiment that I hear so many people that lived through that era talk about is, man, hey, yeah, the record wasn't where it needed to be yet, but it was going. And you mentioned it, close losses. This is stuff that just wasn't happening the last couple of years. I mean, they're getting blown out. So there was talent. There was a lot of hope. I know that so many people believed in Ted Shoebridge. I mean, they really thought that he was a talented guy, that he'd be the guy that maybe brought back a winning season and different things. And as you said too, Rick Tolley himself, 30 years old, head coach. I mean, he's a real young guy. He could have been really a legacy guy there at Marshall if things would have been able to work out. And that is a great what if, because I believe in, just from what I've understood, what I've heard, how I've seen other people talk about his program, that he would have been able to turn that corner. And of course, it's just a tragic event, and it became really the defining moment for our entire program's history. It's an event to which you never wanted to happen, never wished it ever would happen, but because it did, it was able to define who we all are. And really, because of what they were able to stand for and what that entire team, what Rick Tolley brought, it has defined even the legacy that we are now having in Marshall fans. So, I hate all the things that took place. I hate all the tragic events and the funerals and all the things that the 75 absolutely stood for. And one of the biggest things I hate out of that entire situation is the fact that Rick Tolley never had the opportunity to reach his fullest of potential. So that is incredibly sad. I hate that, but I do believe that he would have been a fantastic coach, a coach that we would remember very, very fondly going ahead at Marshall.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I mean, you just look at, he posts, 3-win seasons at that point. That was not bad for Marshall because they had been having just dreadful 0-win seasons, 1-win seasons. And he actually started. You could see that the direction was trending in a good place, and it just unfortunately just something that was out of the hands, out of control of anybody happened. And it just reshaped the entire university, reshaped the football program, and that led us to where we ended up going and where we are now. So despite the sad, tragic story of it, he was a building block of Marshall football history. He was a very key part of that. So cannot take that away from him. But after that, they had the unenviable task of having to rebuild the entire football program essentially from scratch. The athletic department needed rebuilt essentially from scratch at that point. I mean, you got to have new everything. And they end up hiring Jack Lingle in 1971, who, again, is just one of those building block cornerstone saviors of the program. Not because of the success he was able to have, but because If they don't play, I remember watching it was on a documentary back in like '06 when We Are Marshall came out. They were talking to Keith Morehouse, and he said, and I think this is a very, very true statement. If they don't play football in 1971, they haven't played football since. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. If they don't come back and they don't decide to play football again in 1971, they probably don't play it again.
It's a Wichita State situation. It really is.
It's a Wichita State, exactly. That's exactly what it is. And how tragic that would have been. But because of Jack Lingle coming in as a head coach from 1971, 1974, we have a program. We keep the program intact. And yeah, he doesn't have a whole lot of success, which nobody expected him to have a whole lot of success because he was just there basically to quite literally save the program. So looking at these records year by year, he goes 2-8 1971 with the arguably the biggest win in Marshall history against Xavier. That was just like probably not a better football win ever than that. It's life. There's way more. It's way more than just football in that game. So he gets 2 wins there, 2 wins in 1972. They go 4-7 in 1973. So at that point, they hadn't had a 4-win season in probably a decade or close to a decade. But then unfortunately in 74, they do drop down to 1-10, and it just didn't go well that year. And he ended up resigning after the 74 season. I remember reading that a lot of those young Thundering Herd players that he brought in, he was having to not start a lot of these players and having to bring in new guys, and he kind of struggled with that, like having to move on from those guys that he was like in the trenches with and that kept the program alive, and he had a hard time dealing with that, like moving on from those guys. And they didn't want him to resign, from what I read. They didn't want him to resign, but he ultimately did. Ended up becoming the athletic director at Navy, and now he's Hall of Famer, of course. So we have to talk a little bit about this Jack Lingle era as well, because it quite literally saved Marshall football and set it up for the future success that it had. So talk a little bit about Jack there.
Man, what can we say about Jack Lingle, right? Let's be honest, Jack was never the biggest and most hottest coaching candidate in the world. He just wasn't. He coached at Wooster before. He had a 24-21 record there, had really 3 winning seasons. And so, overall he was an okay coach, but if Wooster's such a small place, nobody's looking saying, oh yeah, we really want him for what we are trying to compete nationally on a respectable basis. But, at that time, nobody was going to touch Marshall with a 10-foot pole. Nobody wanted the job. Nobody desired to come in and literally rebuild an entire team and try and save a program. That's hard. But that's why I'm incredibly thankful. I think that, when you watch We Are Marshall, that they do a fantastic job of depicting the heart of Jack Lingle, just because, hey, I'm crazy enough to do this.
Right.
You have to be a little crazy to take that job in 1971, and he was.
Yeah.
And like you said, the fact he won even a game, it's beyond fathomable. They shouldn't have. These guys that he was bringing in, they didn't even play football. They had basketball players and stuff. And it's just unbelievable. But to win 2 games in 1971, beating Bowling Green and Xavier, it's just unbelievable. As you said, those 2 wins are some of the greatest wins in all of Marshall football history. Not because it's impressive, not because it's amazing, but it's because literally, as you all have heard, if you're a Marshall fan, this has almost become a stigma. But from the ashes, literally, they rose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they were able to recreate an entire football program. And if it wasn't for Jack Lingle, if it wasn't for his assistant coaches, Red Dawson, all those guys sticking around, we wouldn't be able to even talk and have this podcast the way that we were. I'm sure you and I probably wouldn't be as big a Marshall fan as we are.
Right.
And so, we are forever indebted for the 9 wins that Jack Lingle had while he was here at this program. They might just be, 9 wins doesn't sound like a lot. It doesn't sound real impressive, but man, take everything into consideration. That is something to which those 9 wins brought every other win that we ever got. So I'm forever thankful for Jack Lingle, and Marshall University is forever indebted to what that man did for this program and bringing us a football team at all. Because without him, we just wouldn't have been able to do it.
No. And he was the perfect guy for the job. I remember hearing past interviews from different people like Ernie Salvatore from the Herald-Dispatch and all that, and he would talk about how he was a humanitarian, he was a father, he was a grandfather, he could understand pain, he could understand emotion, all this stuff. Like, you could not have hired. I know the record doesn't say that, but you could not have hired a better coach, because he wasn't just signing on to be the head football coach. He was essentially signing on to help rebuild an entire community. And he was able to do that. And, like I said, that Xavier win, I mean, it's by most accounts, it's the number one win in Marshall history, not because it was a huge game, not because it was for a championship, but because that win and that game represented healing for a community, that represented hope, that represented resilience, that represented every essentially core value you could have and that you had to have to come back from what they dealt with. That was what that win was. And, we're all, like I said, I think you put it great. We're forever indebted to Zach Lingle for what he was able to do at Marshall, keeping the program alive. So I just figured before we went any farther, we had to talk about him a little bit more, because we would not be sitting here right now if it wasn't Jack Lingle. So it is what it is. So after Lingle resigns in 1974, we hire a guy by the name of Frank Elwood, and he coaches the Herd from 1975 to 1978. And he didn't have a whole lot more success. He goes 9-35 at the helm of the Herd. 1975 they go 2-9. 1976 they go 4-7. 1977 they go 2-9. In 1978 they go 1-10. They joined the Southern Conference in 1977 because after they got kicked out of the MAC, they were independent for a number of years. So they joined the Southern Conference in 1977. But the biggest win by far during this time was in 1976 when Marshall beat number 20 Miami, Ohio, 21-16. That was probably at this point the biggest win in school history based on ranking and everything else. So despite a very unfortunate, win-loss record, he had a huge win there, kept the program going. And then after that, he's shown the door, and they hire a guy that ends up doing a lot more good for Marshall than people realize, Sonny Randall. From 1979-1983, yep, not a very impressive record, but everybody has said and things after that he is the one that really is the true first stabilizer and like getting Marshall back on its feet, like for sure, is set up for future success. They really credit Sonny Randall as being that guy. He goes 12-42-1 from 1979-1983. Had some rough years there, 1-10 in 1979, 2-8-1 in 1980, 2-9 in 1981, 3-8 in 1982, and 4-7 in 1983. So if you notice that trend, he goes up and wins every year. Every year, he starts to win a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And that was a big deal because he ended up setting up Stan Parrish, which we'll get to here in a minute, with big success. And he, probably the most notable player under Sonny Randall, just happens to be Carl Lee, a future NFL All-Pro for the Minnesota Vikings, was a just sensational player for the Herd. I mean, just amazing player. I think he's from South Charleston, local guy. Just amazing stuff there. And he also got Marshall's first Southern Conference win in 1981 over Appalachian State, 17-10. So that was their first ever win in the Southern Conference. And, there was a lot of talk about whether or not he was going to come back in the 84 season or not, because he left, I think, at that point, 17 returning starters in 1984 from a team that had just won 4 games. And, he ends up setting up a guy for a lot of success. But Stan Parrish was the guy that they hired after that. He's the coach from 1984 to 1985. He's the first guy that starts getting wins, really racking up for the Herd in a long time. 13-8-1 record, back-to-back winning seasons. He goes 6-5 in 1984. That was their first winning season in 20 years. They of course go on the road and miraculously, they beat East Tennessee State in that final game of the year, and that's still probably one of the few top biggest wins in Marshall history because it signified they had finally won again. And then in 1985 they go 7-3-1. Very good year there. Carl Fodor at quarterback, if you remember, I don't know, he's probably one of the more forgotten quarterbacks in Marshall history. He was very good for the Herd during those years. And then Stan Parrish leaves to go to Kansas State after the 85 season. So seeing a Marshall head coach being able to leave for a bigger program, that was unheard of at that point. And unfortunately, though, for Stan Parrish, he does not have very much success at Kansas State. He goes, I had to look at this because it was shocking, 2-30-1 at Kansas State. And he was the coach that was there before Bill Snyder gets hired, and he was the greatest coach in Kansas State history. So talk a little bit about those mid to late 70s coaches up through Stan Parrish, because we're gonna give the last guy here a little bit more time. But talk about those three coaches there a little bit.
Yeah, well, I've heard the same things as you mentioned before when Sonny Randall came in. Of course, like you said, there was constant elevation with the program, getting more and more wins every single year. And as you said, those 17 returners, man, I mean, that's the first time ever since the plane crash took place where you could simply say that the guy coming in after inherited something that was worthwhile. And that is a big testament to Sonny Randall. I mean, Sonny Randall's he's kind of a legend, really. I mean, he was a coach at different places. He played in the NFL. He's a broadcaster even as too. So he's a first team All Pro 1960, second team All Pro 1962, 4-time Pro Bowler, NFL receiving touchdown leader in 1960. So I mean, he's kind of a superstar, really. Honestly, that's a big gift that Marshall got him. And of course, he never got to see the accumulation of everything coming together, but he is the architect, I think, of what we would see as far as the first winning season. Now, we talk about Stan Parrish in particular. You know, Stan was somebody that a lot of fans will just always remember just fondly because, again, like you mentioned, beating East Tennessee State on the road and that being the first winning season in a long, long time. How freeing that must have been for the fan base that has just sat through disappointment after disappointment, losing season after losing season. And keep in mind, too, you know, the fan support through all of these years has always been decent. You know, Fairfield Stadium was known to be, they would sell out, and then they would have, I mean, it wouldn't be sold out after that first game, but there would be decent-ish crowds from time to time. And so, the faithful fans that have been there for all of those years, seen all those things happen, watching that win against East Tennessee State, what a moment that must have been. What a time. I can't imagine just how wonderful it would finally be to see your favorite team, the team that you've been rooting for, the team that you never thought in a million years would ever even touch its footing, finally get that ground and have a winning season. And as you mentioned, you know, this is something that's never happened before. I mean, Stan Parrish was the first guy ever to leave for Brighter Pastures, bigger job. And that is a huge testament, again, to what Sonny Randall built, what Stan Parrish was able to maintain. And really, it would be a sneak peek for what the entire program would become, even to this point, because Marshall has now always been that place where, hey, you want to go and you want to have a very solid job and get an opportunity, at least get an offer to go to one of these power conferences and play one of these big universities, go to Marshall because they're going to be consistent. They're going to be winners. They're a team that's always going to be in the mix. So that's where you're able to make a name for yourself. To bring in we'll stop with Stan Parrish. Gotta end myself. We'll get into George Thompson. Let's go talk about him.
Yeah, I mean, good segue right there because, you know, we end up getting to a point after Stan Parrish gets them on to a winning trajectory, and George Chomp comes in after that, and he takes it to the next level. At that time, I mean, he did things that had never been done before, and he coached the Herd from 1986 to 1989. He goes 33-16-1. I mean, at that point, that was unheard of. We hadn't had a coach win that much with that kind of winning percentage since at least probably Cam Henderson, the only one that could even compare to that, really. And, you know, looking at these year by years a little bit, 1986, he goes 6-4-1, so did not make the playoffs yet, but that's a winning season again. That's 3 straight at this point. But then 87 is when things change for Marshall football. 1987 is the year that changed Marshall football forever. They go 10-5. They get to the 1AA playoffs for the first time ever. They get all the way to the championship game and lose a very close 1-point game to Northeast Louisiana, 43-42. They were the national runner-up. That was just absolutely unheard of. Looking at some more stuff from that season, another huge non-conference win. They beat Louisville that year. 34-31 on a last-second touchdown pass from Tony Peterson, one of the best quarterbacks we don't talk about. We'll put that out there. And to Keith Baxter, a 31-yard touchdown as time expired. Tony Peterson was a lethal quarterback at that point, absolutely great. Also, and then so he kind of really got him going there. Also had a guy named John Gregory that had all the passing records up to that point from Marshall history. So between Gregory and Peterson, that was a heck of a two quarterbacks to have. Gregory starts in 1987, but then he ends up getting injured, and that's what led to Tony Peterson starting. And then they make the playoffs that year. They beat James Madison in the first round, 41-16. They beat Weber State 51-23 in the second round. Then the semis, they beat App State 24-10 on the road. And then they go all the way out to Pocatello, Idaho for the 1AA National Championship game. Northeast Louisiana, like I said, 43-42 loss, just an absolute heartbreaker there. But the fact that they were able to get to that point was kind of just miraculous and unheard of, and it never happened before. So at that point, you knew the program was going somewhere. And then you turn around the next year, 1988, phenomenal year. You go 11-2 overall, and you win your first ever Southern Conference title. You tie for the Southern Conference title, first time ever. Their only loss in the regular season was to the Citadel. They went 10-1 in the regular season. I mean, that was just, again, we're gonna keep saying it, unheard of, because that's what it was. They get to the playoffs. They did lose a little bit earlier in the playoffs than they would have liked, I'm sure. Beat North Texas in the first round, 7-0, defensive game there. And then they end up losing to Furman 13-9 in the second round. So they go out in the second round, but still, it's an 11-win season where you win a Southern Conference title. You can't be upset with that. 1989 was a little bit down, but they go 6-5 still. I mean, you still got a winning season. You're still moving. Your things are still moving in the right direction. And then after the 89 season, George Chomp takes the job to go to be the head coach at Navy, where we eventually hire Jim Donnan, and the rest is history. Looking at some of these players under George Chomp that were just superstars for us. Ron Darby, come on, one of the best running backs ever. Tony Peterson, Sean Doctor, one of the best tight ends ever. Mike Barber, one of the best receivers ever. John Gregory, all these guys. I mean, he had talent, a lot of talent, and a total a mass of talent that we had never seen all together at the same time. So George Chomp did amazing things for Marshall, really set him up for big time future success. So talk about his era there.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, he is the man that literally transformed the entire university. We're no longer just playing to win a game. We're playing for championships from this point on. And, you know, my dad, he's talked about, you know, some of those guys that you've mentioned here. You know, Tony Peterson, of course, being a legendary quarterback for us during that era. And then eventually him coming back to different things, for Marshall being quarterback coach a couple of times here. Just that we could do honestly an episode on him. Really, I'd talk about somebody. If you're listening, Tony, man, come on the podcast. We'd love to have you. That'd be a fantastic thing. He's now coaching over here in the state at the moment, but anyway, George Chomp was that man that really transformed everything. So, you know, I remember my dad telling me though that, you know, he went through every single, I guess you could say, season of Marshall football. He's been through the worst, the best, and he really went to almost every single home game, from what I understand. I mean, he just went. He didn't care if they lost. He's gonna be there. And I asked him the other day. I was like, so who'd you like better? Do you like Stan or do you like George Chomp? He told me that he liked George Chomp more simply because, you know, Stan was a good coach, different things. He obviously brought them to that point, but just the overall atmosphere that George Chomp brought, more success obviously on field, was just something that he never experienced before, that nobody in the fan base had ever experienced before. So therefore, it was one of the most exciting times in all of the university's history, because now they went from just being a team that is just there to exist to now we are contending for national championships. And as we mentioned a moment ago, from Jim Donnan onwards, everything's changed. You know, the entire narrative. And we can honestly accredit Sonny Randall for the architect job, the team that he built, the fulfillment of that team with Stan Parrish, and George Chomp being able to take the consistency that Stan Parrish and build something that was just going to forever change this place as we know it. And all these guys played such a pivotal role in making our university what it is. And the Marshall story is definitely one that is a lot of tragedy, a lot of problems, lots of losses, sure, but a lot of triumph as well. And just and through everything, as I've done all the studies, different things, looking at it, man, we're so lucky to have been able to live around this place and be Marshall fans.
Absolutely.
We just are, because nobody has our school. Nobody has the tenacity overall that we do. And Jim Donnan said this last week on our podcast, and I agree with it so much. There is no other university in all of this entire world where the football team means as much as it does here at Marshall. This truly, even today, this team is our team. It is our community's team. It is something to where people of different backgrounds, different beliefs, different ideologies, different ways of life, different income levels come together on Saturday, and they just celebrate Marshall football. Yeah. And that is the great uniter here in Huntington. And I'm thankful for every single coach, good, bad, in between. There's some coaches we can talk bad about, some coaches we can talk a little bit more highly about, but every single one of them has created the entire story that we have here. And like I said, there is no other place in all of the country that has what we have. And I'm thankful just to be a Marshall team.
It's a rite of passage, man. Marshall football is a rite of passage. It really is. I mean, it doesn't get, I couldn't imagine. I mean, I know it's easy to say because I've grown up, lived 30 minutes away my whole life, but like, I could not imagine being a fan of the Rails. I really can't. Like, I mean, I know that there's bigger programs with bigger fan bases and bigger budgets and all that, and that's fine. But the heart of Marshall football and the heart of Marshall fans is just second to none. It really is. And if you get it, you get it. If you don't, then you're missing out, because it's a special place. And I did want to talk, I like what you said there about Sonny Randall, because it's crazy to think that if he was a coach for, 4 or 5 years. It's crazy to say that he was really close to breaking through after 5 years, but he was. He was very close to breaking through. And I think if he had stayed on in 84 instead of Parrish, I think he does the exact same thing as Sam Parrish does. I'm not saying that doesn't negate anything that Parrish did, because he's a very key part of Marshall's uprising. But I don't think there's no question in my mind that Sonny Randall set him up for really good things. So I think that point needs to be driven home, because I think if he had stayed on even just one more year, I think they'd do the exact same thing that they did with Sam Parrish, in my opinion. But that's another hypothetical, we'll never know. But with that being said, goodness gracious, we have quite literally, over the last several weeks, we have literally talked about every single Marshall football coach's history. That's wild. And it's kind of, I wanted to do it that way because I knew that it wasn't going to be like a lot of these older coaches. I knew we weren't going to have a whole lot to say, because like records and stats and facts are just so like up in the air and like uneven and all that kind of thing. But like the fact that we were able to at least acknowledge all of them is pretty cool, I think. I think that's a pretty cool thing we were able to do. And we cannot end it without, and I texted you this a while back, that we have to give our top 5 Marshall football coaches of all time. We have to do it. There's no other way to do it. Now, I will say we did not talk about Tony Gibson there because it's still going on, but that's beside the point. But we have to talk about what we think our list of the top 5 coaches in Marshall history football-wise. So I'm going to let you lead off with that. I'm going to see how these lists compare and how they differ. I'm excited.
All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work at the top and go down, because I think where we're going to be able to have more conversation is kind of on the lower level, because that's kind of going to be a little bit, intermediate. You can change things. I'm going to stay true with my rankings. I gave Jim Donnan an A+. He's my GOAT. He just is. And then, that's just not because we had him on and he's an awesome guy to talk to. That helped, actually, I guess. But before we even had the opportunity to sit down and speak with him, he still just is that special guy. And so I think that he is going to be number 1 in my book. Number two, obviously, they're interchangeable. You're probably going to have the same top two no matter what. Bob Pruitt, of course, what he was able to continue to do with the foundation that Jim Donnan was able to lay down is just unbelievable. It's something that is fantastic. The greatest era of Marshall football was ushered in by him. So we're thankful for Bob. And then I got number three, Doc Holliday. He is the savior of the modern day and age. We just mentioned it with DJ a couple minutes ago here on the podcast. He brought Marshall back to national relevance after a few years of just being in the dumpster. So, we forever have to be thankful for the things that Doc Holliday did. Now, when we get to 4 and 5 and really honorable mention, that's kind of tough. For me, I put down Cam Henderson at number 4 just because he was the first guy to ever do it. Bringing them to the Tangerine Bowl whenever bowl games mattered so much. That's such a big deal. Having the consistency of winning season after winning season, another big deal. So I don't think that you can, that's definitely a reasonable place to put him at number 4. And then, I'll give you that 5 and 6 can be argued, I guess, but I put Chomp at number 5, just because he brought Marshall to that place it had never been before. It's really interesting. The good what if is, what if he didn't take the Navy Academy job, and what if he stayed at Marshall? Would he have been able to find the success that Jim Donnan did? We'll never know, but kind of an interesting thing to think about. He's a legendary coach in his own right, and he deserves definitely, I think, a top 5 spot. Then your honorable mention that I'll give is just Stan Parrish, but Sonny Randall, both of those guys. Just you can't tell the Marshall story without entering in both of those guys. So I think that if you had to narrow it down to about 7 coaches overall, those are the 7 coaches that you would definitely have to make mention of. I say that too. It's hard. You gotta talk about Rich Hall. You gotta talk about Zach Reed. So many guys. But my top 5 again, that's gonna be Jim Donnan, number 1, number 2, Bob Pruitt, number 3, Doc Holliday, number 4, Cam Henderson, and number 5, George Chomp.
Well, that's a solid list, and that's the exact same 5 I have. The order's a little bit different, but besides that, it's the same 5. I mean, and as far as an honorable mention, yeah, I would put Stan Parrish there, probably at 6 or 6. I don't know, maybe 7 or 6, whatever. That's probably where he would be. But my top 5, I'll just start at 5 because I like drawing. I like the drama, drawing it out of there. But number 5. George Chomp, same as you. That's number 5. He's the one that took the program. He's the first one that really took it to a new level. He's the first one that did. I mean, yeah, Stan Parrish had a couple winning seasons, but George Chomp's the one that took it to a different level, getting to a national championship game, getting to the playoffs a couple times, winning the Southern Conference title. That was because he got them to that level. And that goes without saying. Number 4, I have Doc Holliday at 4. He did a tremendous amount of success for Marshall. I mean, I believe he's got, as far as overall wins, I believe he's number 2 in Marshall history. Granted, it was over an 11-year period. It was just a little bit longer than most coaches, but still, I mean, he's one of the longest tenured head coaches in Marshall history. I believe the only coach that coached Marshall longer was Cam Henderson, if I'm not mistaken. That is kind of insane to talk about. You're talking about approximately 150 years, 125 years of football, and he's the second longest tenured head coach. That is wild. So he did great work for Marshall, brought some of the best players we've ever seen, some of the best wins, some of the best success. Like you said, he saved the program, got the program back to a level that it hadn't been at since Bob Pruitt. So Doc Holliday is number 4. I put Cam Henderson at 3, just based on the simple fact that he kind of like revolutionized the game a little bit, or a lot. He kind of just he was the first coach that Marshall ever had that really took Marshall to a level where they were nationally recognized. He's the first one that did that. And the fact that he was in an era where the resources and the things that Marshall just was not in a good place, financially and everything else. Marshall was viewed as like a stepchild, basically, redheaded stepchild, in the state of West Virginia. I remember hearing something a while back that on something I watched, and they were talking about how back in those days, Marshall was like 9th out of 12 funded schools in the state of West Virginia, as colleges. They just were not, were not well kept at all, and he was able to have that much success. So I think he kind of set the tone and revolutionized Marshall athletics. So put him at 3. At 2, I put Jim Donnan. I mean, you could arguably put him at 1. I wouldn't argue with you 1 second there, but I put him at number 2. He's done more. He did more for Marshall at that point than anybody had done before him. He was the one that turned him into an elite program. He was the one that turned him into an elite program, a consistently elite program. He's the one that set up my number 1 for the success that he had. He's the one that just got Marshall football to a different level, like point. And it wasn't just a 1-year thing or a 2-year thing. It was consistently every year. He turned him into that. So he's number 2. Number 1, I went with Bob Pruitt, just based on the the merit of him being the winningest coach in Marshall history in terms of overall wins. The most success, their highest period as far as 1A FBS football, Heisman Trophy candidates, undefeated seasons, conference championships, a national championship, all these players drafted. We had never seen anything like it. Still haven't to this day. We've been close. There's been times, but it has not been that consistent. Like, I mean, we're talking 9 years as a coach, and I think 7 of them, or 6 or 7 of them, he had 10, 11, 12 wins. So, I mean, that doesn't happen very often. So, he's my number 1. But with that being said, man, again, I'm pretty proud that we were able to get through every Marshall football coach ever and talk about him a little bit. This was a super fun series that we did. I mean, it led to so many things that we didn't even see coming, like getting one of the GOATs on here last week. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. And, we're excited I know we talked about doing some basketball, like a men's basketball version of this, and we'll probably start getting into that as well. I don't know how far we'll be able to go back. I'm not sure. I'll have to do some digging and some research, but there'll be a lot to talk about there for sure, because we've had a lot of good coaches for basketball and some down periods as well to talk about. But we'll get into all that eventually, and who knows what we're cooking up for future episodes. It's always ever changing. We might have some more exciting stuff lined up for y'all. We'll have to see how it plays out. But unless you got anything else to add, man, we're pretty much done.
No, man, I'm good. I'm glad we got to do this. It was a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to the day where we can put Tony Gibson as number 1 on both of our lists. That way we all can be in agreement. That'd be fantastic.
Absolutely, that day's coming. We just gotta give me a few more years. But I like where we're going under Coach Gibby, no doubt about it. But that being said, go Herd, and we thank y'all for listening, and thank y'all for the support on our last episode as well. It's been our most popular episode that we've done so far. I had great responses from that, so we're happy about that. And hopefully bring you some more good stuff in the future like that. So go Herd. We'll talk to y'all later. See ya.
Yeah, go Herd.